as is our usual custom, we'll pause for a moment of silence and remember the life of Jenny Cooper Bolden, who's passed away. Thank you. Thank you very much. Jay, I don't know if we have any scouts with us tonight, or do we?
We may have some, but I don't see them in uniform.
Oh, I
You know what I mean?
I see.
So older scout.
Everyone rise for pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have several amendments to the agenda tonight. First of all, we need to add a ceremonial resolution. That goes, as I recall, before new business. We also have a piece of new business I'd like to add as item number 3 concerning the donation of a piece of property. We've been asked to take off old business item number 3, and we've been asked to include a closed session for consultation with our attorney pursuant to GS 143-318-1A3. Is there a motion to amend the agenda in such a fashion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by John Bonnet. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion on the consent agenda, which consists of 5 items tonight? Is there action on the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I have 2 items on the minutes that I would like to address. Before above regular meeting agenda indicates that the motion was made by Commissioner Baldwin, seconded by Commissioner Donate. I thought we would clean that up. Okay. And on the same page, the second bullet from the bottom and the Main Street update. Funny how a letter can do this. The statement is the Main Street Design Committee talked about how the Kimley Horn design with the NCDOT project is marring with the BMP project. Was marrying. So they're working together.
Are there any other amendments to the minutes? And then is there a motion for approval of all 5 items on the consent agenda? So moved by Bette Wilson forward, seconded by Michael Fiocco. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. That brings us then to citizen matters, and we have someone signed up tonight. So we have a tremendous number of people before us tonight. Leslie Oakley wishes to speak before the body tonight.
Good evening. As Mayor Perry said, I'm Leslie Oakley. I represent the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints in the Chatham County area. And I wanted to I've invited Mayor Perry, and she's accepted the invitation for an Apex Christmas Nativity Leader Luncheon that we have annually. Held in Apex, and I wanted to invite the Board of Commissioners as well to come. It's an opportunity for us to honor you for all that you do for the community to make it a better place, and we just really appreciate you and would like for you to come out. And also, we have over 100 Christmases that are out in display, and we'd love for you to come and view that with us and just enjoy an afternoon and as our guests. And also I have some just little handouts too that talk about, it's 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, December 8th, 9th, and 10th. where you can come and bring your family and friends and just enjoy an evening and help bring in the spirit of Christmas at the beginning of the month. So if it's okay, I'd like to hand those out. And also I'll be putting these little handouts at the table in the opening here for anybody who would like to take them for family and friends on the way out. Thank you.
While Leslie's passing those out, let me say that I have the pleasure of being with the Scouts at the church in Pittsburgh this past Saturday. They were doing a Scout Merit Badge workshop, and it was a pleasure to bring greetings from the town of Pittsburgh for that event. On to Commissioner updates. This was one of those months when I, quite frankly, was just thrilled to be the mayor of Pittsburgh because there were lots of fun things to do. The scouting event, got to judge the chili cook-off at the Senior Citizen Center, which involved some mighty fine chilies that George Greger Holt and I and Louis Farini tasted and judged and awarded prizes to. Yes, over the weekend also had the 100th birthday of our citizen Annie Brooks Matthews that was celebrated, and it was just a joyous occasion and brought greetings from the town for that event. And of course, we've had our street fair in the meantime since the last meeting, and I've also kept the grandchildren for a period of time and wanted you to know that they think that the Rock Ridge Park is just absolutely wonderful. And so Parks Director Paul made a big hit there with a number of people. When we first got out of the car, a couple from Durham said, "Oh, this is the best disc golf course in all of North Carolina," and it was designed by somebody very expert from Texas, and they just went on and told me all kinds of things that as mayor of Pittsburgh I should have already known, but the grandchildren just truly enjoyed it. So, are there any other commissioner meetings that involve the EDC or the Triangle J Council of Governments or Main Street?
Yeah, we have to do a report that, well, the PBA is beginning their holiday season, and that will go from November 20th through December 17th. The tree lighting ceremony is Sunday, November 20th, between 4 and 6 p.m. There is a small business Saturday, which is November 26th. There is a First Sunday Artisan Fair on December 4th. And of course, we have the Christmas parade all on Sunday, the December 11th, and then Santa Goes on Trial, December 17th. There are two shows, or two hearings.
Yes.
Okay. One at 2 p.m. and one at 6 p.m. And also, the Main Street program has been working with the town and the DOT and Kimley Horn to try to get the BMP and the other improvements associated with the circle and the three corners, northwest, northeast, and southwest, to marry and not mar each other, and I'm happy to say that's going well.
Thank you. And for those of you who look puzzled about the trial of Santa Claus, it's absolutely wonderful. It was done last year, and Santa Claus is, well, you know, actually I didn't go to it last year. I wasn't able to go.
Like
Miracle on 34th Street. And it was a big hit in town. It really was. All right. Anything else? Any other reports? Climate change? EDC? Anything? All right. Then let's move to a resolution that we added as a result of our amendments to the agenda. This is a resolution by the Board of Commissioners for the town of Pittsburgh, North Carolina, honoring November 9th through 16th, 2016 as Peace Week. Whereas the week of November 9th through 16th is the week of peace as proclaimed by the United Nations, and whereas this week is a time to reflect on and recommit to honor human rights, philanthropy, and tolerance for all people throughout the world. And whereas peace encompasses many venues for peacemaking, peace in our private lives, with our relationships with each other, with our marriages or significant relationships, peace in the political process, peace with world governments, peace building in the environment, sustainable peace and justice throughout our community, our country, and the world community. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town Board of the Commissioners of Pittsboro reflect and recognize their hope for the Town of Pittsboro to be a peaceful community, and the Board recommits to strive for and achieve peace in many respects of municipal government, interactions with constituents, employees, county and state governmental agencies, and federal governmental agencies for the betterment of the citizens and for the long-term benefit of the Town of Pittsboro. This resolution was approved at the regular meeting of the Board on November 14, 2016, and shall be entered in the public records for the Town of Pittsboro, indicating the Board's commitment to peace. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by John Bonnet, seconded by Pamela Baldwin and Bette Wilson Foley. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Under new business, Paul, we have you to speak on our comprehensive master plan process this evening.
Well, thank you. This is a very exciting time. I also have with me Nick Kuhn, who's the project manager with AECOM. And he'll be able to answer any questions you may have about the project. This Parks Master Plan is a huge deal. It'll set the tone and guide development through a very inclusive process that will include a broad section of the community. And that's one of the specialties of Nick Kuhn with AECOM, is really doing that public involvement piece. This will guide basically every policy relating to Parks and Recreation and guiding system growth for at least the next 5 years. So it's huge. We appreciate the support and your commitment to funding this during your budget cycle. There's a second component to this as well, which is that the county public health department has contributed $12,000 to this project. Part of what they want is to have better data. So we're adding some components to the statistically valid survey, which a lot of plans just, if you just interview parks lovers and parks goers, then you're going to get a biased report. But a statistically valid survey is going to give you opinions from everybody within the community, which is really what you want in providing rational decisions. They, as part of the health department's request, we're adding some additional cross-tabulations to that statistically valid survey, which can correlate demographic information with responses, so that one of the components that I think will be important is social equity and ensuring that everyone has equal access to parks, and having good information going in helps us to, again, inform policy. The other component is a health impact. It's not quite a health impact analysis, but a health evaluation component, which would be performed by Alta Planning and Design. And that's an area of their expertise, and that's an added component to the core plan. As the memo points out, $60,000 was allocated this year. This scope goes beyond that. This envisions adding the remaining portion to the next fiscal year budget, 2017-2018. And do you have any questions?
Well, Well, I think I read through it pretty thoroughly, and I'm excited about it. I think it's a really good plan. I like the additional health evaluation component. I do have a question of well, I'm just curious to know. There was this discussion about ad buys.
Oh, well, so part of this is there's a social, and Nick, if you'd like to speak. Nick is subcontracting with a group that specializes in social engagement. So in order to maximize that, part of that is purchasing ad buys, so that I think one thing we don't want, and it's a pet peeve of mine, is when you see public projects, plans like this that just kind of go through and do a perfunctory, we've consulted the public. What we really want to be is effective in engaging people. So those ad buys help ensure that more people get that message. So there's a private group, Citizen, that's very much like MindMixer. It was one of the early social engagement tools. My Sidewalk is one that the county's using with their comprehensive land use plan now. But it's a way to engage the public online through a lot of different mechanisms, including polling, surveys, questions, dialogues, different things to get people's opinion. And Nick, you?
Yeah, the ad buys are really social media impressions for Facebook and Instagram to make sure people are engaged in. Is one of 12 different techniques that we've got incorporated in here to help with the public outreach, make sure that we have very broad consensus building participation throughout the entire community.
There's mention of a steering committee. Is there a process by which that will be established? Do you see any reference to that? And it also states that you're going to identify key stakeholders. So I'm always curious to know how we're going to go about doing that.
We haven't gone into specifics with that, but of course the Board of Commissioners is going to be included. We want it to be as broad as possible. Certainly things that parks impact. Economic Development Corporation's a no-brainer. Of course, parks mesh completely with that, and with the health department. We have a strong arts community, community college. So a lot of the same actors that you see in a lot of your public engagement in terms of whether that gets vetted by the board and you select people or we come up with a list. I think every community does it differently. Nick, would you?
Yeah. Remain flexible in terms of the needs that stakeholders in the steering committee would like to provide.
Well, I think I'd certainly like to stay informed.
No, of course.
So I'd like to know. Two other things is when I looked through this, it got to the end, it said public hearing, and it looked up, and I am thinking, we've got a public hearing. There's going to be, I know you're trying to elicit input from the community up front. But I think there's always going to be, we're having a public hearing to hear what the public has to say. I think we should be able to address their comments or respond to that input. And I didn't see that there was any scope of work after that fact, so I may be wrong, but I would like to include that.
And one thing that I liked about their proposal is that there's check-ins after every single phase. So it's not we're going to disappear into a dark, smoky room and come up with a plan and then dump it on you 8 months later. There's 5 basic phases. The 4 are going to have, sum ups and make sure that we're all on the same page as a community going forward before you even go into the next thing. So when we go into our existing conditions, the board will validate that and say, yeah, this makes sense to us. This is what we're going for. We have a consensus, a working consensus enough to move forward on to the next phase. So I think when you look at breaking it up into chunks there, and I know Nick has been very reassuring anytime I've had a similar concern about that. And, okay, here's this, what's next? The assurance is always, well, we're not going to leave you hanging. We're going to get this done until both I'm happy with it, you're happy with it, and he as a professional is happy with it. So I think there's going to be a process at the end there to incorporate any concerns that would come up. Hopefully there won't be many at the end of that process. I think the process itself going forward will nip a lot of that so that everyone's heard and included, so that there's no last-minute surprises coming in.
Potential for that. I know we can strive to do that, but I always anticipate we're going to have a public hearing, not just for show. We will have comments.
And hopefully we'll have again, sincere, well-attended engagement throughout the process, and that's certainly a goal of mine.
Assuming we move forward with this, when's your schedule to start? I'll recommend that you wait till after the holidays, because you're looking for input, and the holiday inertia is not going to provide good input.
I agree, and that's clearly we're here in November, getting ready to go into the holidays. One good thing is that there's a lot of background reading, a lot of input plans. So I'm eager to put Nick to work and get him going. So also the project's tied to deliverables, not time frames so much. So probably the public meetings and those kickoffs, I agree with you. I think we should bump till later, but there's a lot of work that's going to be going on from Nick here and his team in the meantime. So we envision getting it under contract and moving forward right away. You just might not see those input sessions right away.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Any further questions for Paul?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't really get to read over this too much this weekend. We were out of town, but correct me, Jeff, are we not going through this same with our UDO and Module 2 with our parks?
Open space is in Module 2. There'll be some cross mingling between Paul's plan and ours. So this is more of a plan where that's more regulation.
Well, and one of the questions I did have is how would this inform the UDO? And I think there is discussion about how it would contribute to the UDO. Yeah.
I fully expect implementation items to come from Paul's project to implement into the future UDO. Won't be there for the first draft that we'll approve, but when this project's complete, there'll be a list of implementation things that we want to consider to add to the UDO or change.
And we will get a first-time draft on this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Again, not just at the end, as stated before. You'll get updates throughout the process. And hopefully be engaged in the process throughout too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Further questions or thoughts?
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the manager's execution of this contract.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Bette Wilson Foley. Is there further discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, unanimous.
Great. There is a second resolution accepting the gift from the Chatham Public Health Department.
Public health grant, okay.
Make a motion that we approve the public health grant from the Chatham County.
Second. Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Pamela Baldwin. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work.
All right. Under new business, our second item is the review contract to potable water interconnection study. Craig Royal.
Thank you and good evening. This memo and contract for interconnection study, it began in theory when Hillsborough had a drought. I'm trying to remember when that was, Brian.
2007.
2007. And we had one when you were here as well. Yeah.
The really bad one was.
Anywho, we've been contemplating what to do with droughts. And then we started contemplating what to do about the fact that we have a sole supply of water from the Haw River. And you've heard reports about the Haw River related to water quality, but there's also issues that I've actually been looking into since before I was a town employee, which has to do with the hydro dam, the hydro plant, the dam, which in fact the town has no ownership or ability to monitor, maintain, or what have you. And then obviously the issue of growth and water demand came online, so we're looking at a lot of different issues with the Haw River. So the point of this study is to take the Chatham County water model and marry it with the Pittsboro water model and calibrate those two models together. We have some technical work to do. Our model is not 100%, and we like to give them the best data possible so our model and their model work well together and give us data that we actually believe in. And what I mean by data is pressures, flows, etc. And once we get the two models married, we then start looking at ways to move water between the two systems back and forth. And you do that with different scenarios with water pressure zones and pressuring one zone into another. And the way you do that is through pumps or elevation tanks. And so the idea is to look at that with the ultimate goal of looking at how can Pittsboro receive additional potable water through this system that's already built and where we can theoretically spend relatively fewer dollars making connections and doing water transfer and water purchase agreements versus a huge capital expense of upfitting our water treatment plant as the other alternative, which that would also not address the sole water supply source issue of the Haw River. So that's the initial purpose of this project. I think the project will go into other areas as we get deeper into it, but this first contract phase or task order, if you will, with McGill would be to marry the two models and then look at these interconnection availabilities that we currently think we have. One of them being Bynum at the bridge, referred to as Bynum Beach. We do have a physical connection there. It's, in my understanding from staff, it has not been exercised. There's a meter there. The intent was for Pittsboro to move water into Chatham County from that position. It's never happened. The county's never asked for it. They've never needed it, frankly. And so the idea is to look at it in the reverse fashion, and well, what if we could get water through that system to Pittsboro from Chatham County water system? They purchase water from Cary, they purchase water from Durham. They're connected basically to the entire triangle at that location through pipe connections. And then also to look at some other connections, possibilities which are in the south part of the county or south of town, coming from the Sanford area and out west coming from the Siler City area. In the east, we're looking at this Jordan Lake, what we've been referring to as the Western Shore intake study of up to 6 million gallons a day. So that's kind of where we're looking at for the east, which coincidentally, I was just informed that the Environmental Management Commission is going to take up our allocation in January in a meeting, and they had the public hearing back in April, and I don't believe that there was a lot of contentious comments, or other than there were some issues from further downstream in the Fayetteville area, but that's not our issue whatsoever, and it's not related to the allocation, in fact. So hopefully we'll hear some news, some good news from the state in the first of the year, somewhere after the first of the year, January, February timeframe. So this is simply a marrying of two models and start looking at some interconnection possibilities with the goal of coming back to the Board of Commissioners with alternatives and costs on what we could do to gain more potable water, either for purchase to meet our demand or for even emergencies, and compare that to where we're heading with the Haw River plant and what we could do there. So that's pretty much it. And it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 month process. The other issue, or which is kind of good news, is Chatham County has agreed to cost share in this contract, 50%. We do not have the memorandum of understanding yet, but that's forthcoming. But we would like approval to go ahead and begin the work so that the modeling can begin, the desktop modeling piece. That will take probably a month to get that started. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, a lot of questions come up, Fred. Thank you. This is very intriguing and it's very timely. I've just recently been worrying, honestly, about this. And forgive me if it's been presented to me and I'm just absent cognizance of it, but do we have projections yet for drinking water for the growth that we're considering, for example, in line with the wastewater needs of 4 million gallons per day by 2035, I think it was?
Yes, our allocation application has all of that in it, and projections, and based on population growth and water conservation measures, and et cetera. So we do have projection of growth curves.
And those are curves, not straight line?
Yep, they're curves. So that process went through about 2 years ago as we were working with our data, our zoning, and our planning work on density estimates and things of that nature for total population and water demand. And of course, we had to keep thinking we're going to go with purple pipe, we're going to go with other measures like you have before you tonight, a draft ordinance on water efficiency, which would drive down potable demand per capita over time because of the fixtures, and married with the purple pipe, the reclaimed water aspects, and just the fact that people don't use as much water as they used to on a household to household type way. So all that was looked at and as we move forward.
Okay. And it sounds like the scope, if I may repeat it back to make sure I'm doing active listening, you say we need to marry the two models, our understandings of the two systems, the county system and the town system, connections, where they go, pressures, etc.
Right.
And the second point is to examine those interconnection possibilities that are not in effect already, and that would be new pipes to connect to other systems for regional collaboration.
Right.
Okay. And so is the presumption that all of that is less expensive than building new additional capacity anywhere within the town's ETJ?
That's the thought, that say a quarter mile of additional pipe between two fire hydrants that are on completely separate systems today, if you connected them and you looked at what would happen with pressure differential, then you could theoretically put new pipe in and maybe put a booster pump in on one side or the other to meet the maximum capability of the system, as you go out into the two modeled systems. So we would analyze, connecting two pipes with a third pipe, then maybe putting a booster pump in to see and to drive water in this direction or that direction at a less cost than if you were to do the equivalent of plant expansion type of thing.
Okay. So is that calculation because of our understanding, perhaps just conventional knowledge, your expertise about the relative expense of new drinking water
Correct.
treatment plant versus interconnecting with someone who already has existing capacity or overcapacity?
That's correct.
And is it also informed by our understanding that there are others who have, county I assume, Sanford I assume, who have extra capacity in drinking water?
Correct. And maybe others.
Okay. Final question. I have heard from a concerned citizen that there is one connection in particular with the county, perhaps in the western part of town, that if we had this connection, apparently it's only a mile, that would greatly improve our resilience in cases of fire, fire suppression. So,
Yep, that's what we'll look at with the model.
does that ring a bell, and is that one on your list to be examined?
That's an area of low pressure, so it probably would help. But we have to look at, that's in a certain low pressure zone, so we would look at how to ameliorate that low pressure zone and make it a higher pressure zone, and provide flow from another source as it flows way through the system from the north to get to the south and the west.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions for Fred?
Fred, you mentioned WaterCat. Are we using that program as a county?
Mhm.
So marrying those two.
Yes. Well, easy is a
Well,
difficult
it'll be
word.
less difficult if we were just
Yes.
using two different software packages.
They are compatible models.
With this, I know the Jordan Lake Partnership envisions this interconnected rural sharing water from Jordan Lake. Is part of what this study would do be part of that study, or, I mean, I recognize quite frankly that this is important to be done right now. I'm just wondering, is this all part of the scope of work the Jordan Lake Partnership will undertake if in fact the allocations are granted in January?
No.
Okay. So this is a standalone exercise to give us, to search for the most cost-effective, redundant water supply, given our sole
Correct.
source.
Yeah. That interconnect study pretty much stopped at the Cary County connection, essentially. Is my understanding. It didn't get as far as get into Chatham County deep. It focused on, the primary users, which is Durham, Raleigh, Apex, Owasso, the main systems. And then it went out on the little peripheral as far out as the contract allowed. But as my understanding is, it essentially stopped at the Chatham County Cary connection. It didn't carry through to Pittsburgh.
So there'd be a pretty substantial infrastructure improvement to get that water that's allocated to the town.
The 6 MGD?
Yep.
Yes. The current engineering feasibility study shows brand new 24-inch ductile iron coming from
I think I'm beginning to see that map again in my head.
Jordan Lake.
Yes. Okay.
Further questions for Fred?
Fred, I have one. Still weighs heavy on my mind is, looks like we're going out of town with some engineering services. Why are we not using hydrostructure?
For this modeling?
Well, for about any modeling. that we use.
McGill...
We have more experience with our water and wastewater and our piping that's in the ground in this city, and we use them less and less.
That's a fair question. McGill they operate the county model, which is primarily the model that's going to be used for the study. Our model is going to be used to connect it because they're going to look at the nodes. Hydrostructures will come in as a peer review after we're done with the main modeling. We're going to have them look at the model to make sure they agree with it. we're not hiring McGill because for any other reason other than they're very familiar with the model that's going to be looked at for the source supply for our water, if that makes any sense. And it would cost a lot less as well. If I'll just tell you straight up, it would cost a lot less because McGill already has the model. To be fair to Hydrostructures, they haven't given me a proposal. And to be even fair, I asked for one, and I didn't get one. But they know that we're going to probably have them look at this married model when the time comes. I will point out that they started work today on the I&I project, the sewer.
Hydrostructures.
Yes, Hydrostructures is 100% doing all services for that project.
Further thoughts or questions? All right, thank you, Fred.
Sure, thank you.
So do we need a motion for the master services agreement and the task order? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Shall we do this separately? Should we take task order number 1 first? Are there further questions, or are we ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant the town manager authority to execute the attached contract, which is the requested action.
Is there a second to Mr. Fiocco's motion?
Second.
Seconded by John Bonnet. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. The motion carries. And authorizing the manager to go forward with this contract. Okay. We added item number 3 to the new business agenda, which is the memorandum that's here on your desk from Ryan Grusbeck regarding the Jane Powell property. And a couple of months ago, I received word through a third party that the Powell family was interested in making a donation of this property. This is where the log cabin used to be, and is a parcel containing 0.34 acres off of Rectory Street. It's the area in red there on your map. And Hobbs Architects is next door in the larger piece that lies to the east there. And they utilize the log cabin as a conference room for their architectural business. If you haven't seen it, it's quite amazing. So they moved the log cabin off of that property and onto theirs, leaving this 0.34 of an acre blank and unimproved. The lot contains a stream, which is a conservation easement. And Fred, you had indicated to me in an email not long ago that you had an intern take a look at that conservation area, that stream buffer, and I couldn't quite judge the conclusion that your intern came to regarding that. Was there a conclusory thought about that conservation?
There was. It basically took a 50-foot swath with the stream in the middle of it the idea was to put an easement around it, and it's a water quality project that was built by 319 grant monies like we're doing with other ones, and it needs maintenance. It's been several years, but it serves as a water quality function as well as can serve as another function like a pocket park or something.
As I recall, it comes down the boundary of the Powell property and the property there at the corner of Salisbury and Rectory, and then comes down and is behind the old hatchery building. Is that correct? Is that part of that stream that
That's right.
eventually goes into Hill Creek?
It comes through here,
Yes.
and then it goes under the culvert here. So this is the piece that was restored.
Okay.
It is, and it does have quite a outcropping of bamboo. I think Mr. Grusbeck, you called it a thicket. And
I think that was.
Oh, was
Did
that?
I say thicket?
Oh, was that Paul?
I don't know. I
Well,
might
you
have called
read
it.
it. It's a thicket, all right.
You could call it worse than a thicket.
And it's one of those things that's creeping, but at any rate. So the family, which consists of Jane's sister, Nancy Simon, who lived here in Pittsburgh for a number of years. Her husband was one of the pastors of the Episcopal Church, as I believe, as I recall. She and another sister and a brother who lives in California all agreed that this would be a lovely gift to the town. The one thing that they are requesting is that if the town chooses not to use it for a park or open space or a conservation type use, that they would like a clause in the deed that would rescind the gift and take it back to the family's ownership. So they have a clear intent that it be used in that kind of fashion.
I'd just like to share an interesting story about that piece of property in Jane Kyle. I used to work in the library, and every night, right at dusk, you would hear this bang, 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 bang. And she would walk up and down that property with 2 pots and pans trying to scare the birds off the nest. Nice memory of her.
Well, she was an incredible woman, and having worked with the Historical Society for a little while, and my husband being more involved in it, she was just an amazing woman. She could virtually tell you your family genealogy if you were with Chatham roots, and it was one of those things that she just never you never tired of hearing her stories. So
she did a lot of work on documenting graveyards in Chatham County and recording graves and things like that. And she's also very active in the library.
So the question is, Paul Messick has drawn up a resolution regarding the acceptance of the donation of this piece of property, and that is attached there in your file and there on the screen. And are there any further questions about the gift, or is there a motion to approve the resolution in acceptance of it?
My only question, Mr. Horn has left the room, but presumably it's not too late to include this in the master planning process?
I think it says in here that that will be considered how we use it in the...
Yeah, that was my point, is that, because the question would come up, well,
Oh, yes, you mentioned it.
what would we use it for? And I just, let's walk that through that process and figure out. In the meantime, I think there's minimal upkeep, hopefully, from my standpoint, my eyeball survey of it, there's going to be minimal upkeep that's required on our part to keep it as a passive park for the time being. So if that holds up, we're in pretty good shape. So.
Is anyone at all aware of the neighbors' sentiments?
The neighbors there on the corner, Bill Holloman and his wife Stephanie Bass, are very excited about this. They themselves would have liked to have purchased the property, as the Hobses would have, but the value that came back was beyond the level that they wanted to invest in. that makes it even more of a plum, quite frankly, for the town. And as we all know, there are very few lots that are left in town that have this kind of capability. And Fred, if you think the cost is nominal for the upkeep of that part of the stream conservation area, are we talking about a large amount of money, or?
I'm just going to guess that it'd probably be a couple $1,000s to get it back to where it needs to be, because it's been left dormant. But after that, it wouldn't be. It'd be like maintaining any parkland, whatever Paul's numbers look like for parkland.
Who holds the easement at this time?
Nobody. There is no easement.
No conservation easement? So that was just a water quality project that the town undertook?
The town didn't undertake it.
No.
State did.
The state did?
The state?
The North Carolina State Water Quality Group.
Yeah.
They presumably had a contract with James to do that. I don't know.
Well, I remember working just as a volunteer on the part that was over by the veterinarian's office, and there were a big group of us that did work to try to get that part of the stream engaged, but I never did know whether it was personal property, an agreement with the town or the state. Okay.
There's some access issue. I mean, the culvert there where the creek goes under the road has been a problem in the past because people trying to park on that street. So, I mean, there's some limitations to the lot and to its use for anything other than passive, whatever. And you wait too long, the bamboo will take it off.
Is that a stream on the property? So it'll be buffered?
Yeah, half of it will be in the stream deep buffer thing area. The other half is in, 2/3 of that's in bamboo.
Might be a small pocket.
Small pocket.
Well, it's non-native bamboo, so.
It was a pleasure, board.
Yes. Bring that to them. I'm trying to think how that would fit into a motion. Make a motion to accept the donation of the Jane Powell property.
Moved by Bette Wilson Foley, seconded by Pamela Baldwin. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Thank you very much. And we promise the family that we'll do it within this tax year, so all is agreed to being able to meet that deadline. Thank you. Moving to old business. Now, first is the Chatham Park Additional Element Review Committee with Jeff Jones leading our update.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. I wanted to give you a quick check-in on our work that the Additional Elements Committee has been undertaking over the last month or so. As we all know, you appointed this committee back in September. They began their work in early October with presentations by Chatham Park. Throughout the month of October, they met again, the committee that is, on the 19th, and then again on November 2nd to discuss the first 4 elements that they were going to undertake, which is going to be phasing, signage, lighting, and parking and loading. They have completed their work on those first 4 elements, and I anticipate that the chair, Jim Noss, will be here to give their recommendations at the 28th meeting. I wanted to sort of remind the board of what we had kind of mapped out back in September for this work and how that would parlay into you all potentially holding a public hearing on these first 4 elements sometime in November. plan was that like in September, that tonight you would be hearing from Jim on these recommendations, and then you would be ready to have a public hearing on the 28th meeting. You could do that. You could still hold a public hearing on the 28th and have Jim's recommendations, the committee's recommendations, as part of that public hearing process. And you could set that public hearing tonight at this meeting. If that's not the pleasure of the board, then what we would be looking at is a 28th meeting to discuss the recommendations from the committee with Jim. And at that time, you could decide to hold a public hearing at your next meeting, which would be December 12th. The planning board would fit into that schedule of, if it's the 28th, the planning board would make their recommendation at their next meeting in December. If it's the 12th, then the planning board would make a recommendation to you all at their January meeting, which would be adjusted because of the town holiday of that Monday, so it would probably be adjusted to the Wednesday of that first week in January. The committee has been doing great work, good attendance at most of the meetings. We started out with 14 members. We know Tyson Miller did not accept the appointment, and you all chose to lead the committee at 13 at that time. We have had a couple of other folks rotate off of the committee, either by lack of participation and or the work was too much to keep up with their work that they needed to do in their private life as well. Anthony Davis is one of those members who is not going to be on the board committee any longer, and Judge Suprick cannot meet the obligations of being on the committee. So we're at 11. I counted at the last meeting, I think there was 9, and generally around 9 to 10 folks is how many we've had. It's just been good. And I think Jim will echo the sentiments that this committee that you put together, they all talk and they all give their opinions and add to the discussion, which is great. And I think the committee has done good work on these first 4 elements, and they will have good recommendations for you all to hear on the 28th. I can answer any questions that you might have. I know several members have attended some of the committee meetings. We do have a committee meeting this Wednesday to start the second set of elements, and this one will be where Chatham Park will give their presentation on those. They're generally environmental elements, which would be stormwater, open space, landscaping, and tree protection. And we will meet here at 7 o'clock to go over those elements. Any questions, I can answer those for you.
Thoughts or questions?
Well, I'm comfortable scheduling the presentation by Jim and the public hearing for the same evening. In fact, I think that might be beneficial for the public to hear that presentation and be present to have comments. So I certainly am in support of that. On a side note, the last planning board member, there was a lot of consternation among one member who felt as though the planning board was not in a position to provide commentary and felt as though they were behind the 8 ball. And to that, I have suggested to the chair that recognize that concern of that member and see if they couldn't hold a meeting prior to the 28th, because I think they've all read it pretty thoroughly. They just were not prepared that evening to have that discussion. And I think, I certainly would like to give them that opportunity to know they've got a meeting where they can have that discussion and make a recommendation with their notes in front of them, because quite frankly, many of the members were sitting there saying, I've got things to say, I just didn't know we'd talk about it tonight, so I'm not ready. would love to see them have that opportunity to take advantage of that opportunity. So, we schedule a meeting for the planning board, but I'm comfortable going forward with the 28th. I think that the planning board sought to meet prior to that date to gather their thoughts and debate the issues. I think that'd be a good thing.
Is that you would like to have the planning board's recommendation prior to the public hearings? Is that what we want to do moving forward with the elements?
I think it would be good if they were prepared to be a participant in the public hearings.
Right. It's not necessarily a formal recommendation, but just be able to give you all guidance from their perspective.
And I think to do that, they would have to have that meeting where it is a board meeting and they discuss it, as opposed to a couple of folks trading emails back and forth.
Right. So at the last plan board meeting, which was last week, it was on the agenda to discuss the additional elements. We had 4 members here. We had some absence from the board, and 2 of the members have definitely provided comments to staff and probably to you all in the past as well. You've been copied on some comments from planning board members on their perspective of the additional elements. What hasn't happened is a collective discussion amongst the board as to be able to get a better understanding as to how one member feels versus another member. And what is slated to happen is that their December 5th meeting is that they are going to discuss these 4 elements again. That'll be on the agenda, and start a process of discussing 2 additional elements leading up to a potential recommendation on these next set of 4s. So I think the next one we're going to discuss, I want to say it's open space and tree protection is the next that the planning board was going to take up on December 5th, along with the first 4 elements to finalize those. And then they would be prepared to give you that recommendation, I assume, for later in December. The way it would work now is you would hold the public hearing on the 28th. The planning board would either have already given you a recommendation prior to, or at least on that 5th meeting, and then you would be ready to make some sort of potential decision on December 12th. What could happen, and I shared this with the planning board last week, is that the applicant could choose to hear the public hearing, hear comments from staff and from you all and from planning board, everybody who's at the public hearing, and choose to pull those elements back and not ask for the town board to approve these elements without some edits. That's a possibility that could happen. So we could hold the public hearing on the 28th, and I could see Chatham Park pulling these first 4 elements off of the table for a little while, doing some edits, and then maybe coming back to you all in January, whenever they chose to come back. So it might not happen as succinctly as what was laid out for us in September, because I do believe that there's going to be a good chance that they're going to want to make changes from what they've heard from everyone involved in the process.
Would those edits require another public hearing after the edits were completed?
I don't think so, but Mr. Messick could.
I guess it depends on the edits.
If it was
If they're substantial in nature, is that the review process?
Somebody there, I have to make the determination whether they were more restrictive or less, but I'm not sure anyway. I don't know. We have to research that issue.
Well, could we avoid that by holding the public hearing open?
Well, that doesn't really accomplish anything, so save an ad in the paper.
Right.
It would be a general opening because we wouldn't know what date we're leaving it open to, and I think we would want to know that specific date that we're leaving it open to. So if we held a 28th meeting and we said it was going to be somewhere like January, what would that be, 9th, I think is our first meeting in January. I guess you could do that and put the onus on Chatham Park to come back with edits on that first meeting in January. Or so you don't want to just have it left open for an indefinite period.
Well, this is not a rezoning public hearing. This is something that's in the master plan. It requires you to have to take one public hearing. If you want to have more than one, that's certainly up to you to do as many as you want. But you're not required to have the one. So, again, depending on what the edits are, whether you think that you would get some benefit from having a public hearing, it's completely up to you. And you just have to wait and see.
Well, if we knew a date certain, then we could hold it open to that date. If it was more uncertain, then
I think you're going to be able to hear from the applicant at the public hearing as well. So you're going to be able to ask those types of questions of their anticipation of edits and/or time frame that they might need to get something back to you all, and especially with enough time for staff to be able to go through and document what those changes were. And I'm not sure if you're going to want the committee to weigh in on those potential changes or not, or if we're just going to allow the applicant staff to say what the changes were.
Administratively, it would be so much easier just to call for a second public hearing, rather than trying to pick a date on the calendar.
I was looking for a way to simplify it, so if that's complicated, then we'll do that.
Well, the proposal to have the public hearing on November 28th, I'm not quite sure how to word. I have a little discomfort with that. Also, the interplay between the planning board and the additional elements review committee is something that I'm very keenly interested in learning more about. And having been present for both of those meetings, I'm sensitive to some thoughts from the planning board that their written comments haven't gone to the additional elements review committee members. I think that would be beneficial. And at some point in the formation of the additional elements review committee, I think that we had an opportunity. One of the planning board members had actually applied, and my thinking was, well, it's not necessary because he already has a bite at the apple as a member of the planning board, and presumably that would feed into the additional elements review. So I guess I'd just like to see that actually feed into.
That's where it was unclear.
Yeah.
Because I took that as you wanted separation between the planning board and this committee.
Okay.
That there was not a liaison from the planning board to be able to be that. And we talked about that. And so it was my understanding that there was a separation, that you wanted to hear from this committee, you wanted to hear from planning board, you wanted to have different perspectives, not influenced perspectives, and you would be able to make those decisions based off of the two perspectives.
Okay, sure, that's a reasonable conclusion. I understand that. And yet I'm still hungering for that.
But if that's the desire of the board, we will move forward. There's always time to do that. We have two sets of elements that we're going to move forward with, and we can change course tonight if we need to do that.
Well, I think it is a good thing to actually have them as separate, just as I think it is a good thing to have staff's report as a separate item, just as I think it is to have the general public's report as a separate item for all these different perspectives to contribute to a common vision if we can. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with planning board doing their review, advisory committee doing their review, staff doing their review, and hearing what the public has to say at the public hearing.
I'd rather have it separate, remain separate, because I think you get a lot of different perspectives like that, where the planning board, they were dealing on the committee with the additional element, they might want, people might be on there and say, okay, we'd rather listen to the people on the planning board. So I would prefer for it to stay separate, and we have separate information from each one. Now, I don't know if you were saying that you don't think that there was enough time, Commissioner Bonnet, for them to review, for the planning board to have time to review this, and then they get together as a board and discuss it before November 28th. Is that what you were thinking?
Well, that's certainly a part of my concern, yeah. Thank you.
That's what I was sort of thinking too.
But what I'm suggesting is not that planning board participate in that meeting. What I'm suggesting is that the Additional Elements Review Committee have the benefit of those written comments. And that seems like that's going to require, because to your point, to your reassurance that the deliberation for these first four elements has occurred separately. The deliberation occurred months ago by the planning board, and within the past month and a half by the Additional Elements Review Committee. So when the Additional Elements Review Committee receives the comments, written comments from the planning board, it will be fresh to them, but they will have already thought it through themselves. And if we choose, we could ask them to continue that kind of phasing. But if you really want that distinction, that siloing.
So you want them to review what the planning board, well, I'm sorry, but you want the Additional Element Committee to review what the planning board has indicated.
Yes.
Well, I'll reiterate my interest in them being separate. And really, I think both should be reported to us.
I guess one question I have is, where are all those things going to merge together? I understand the separation of the deliberations. I'm just wondering if at some point they need to merge so that we don't, I mean, ostensibly we could have 4 or 5 different, we could have the committee, we could have the planning board, we could have staff, and we could have members of the public all saying X about signage. And how do we filter that? How do we merge that into what is going to be the ultimate rule on signage? I'm just wondering how that's going to, how that's going to work. There may not be that many sets of opinions about some of these are more regulatory things.
Right, and this first set, there may be multiple comments that look the same between the groups.
That in itself is interesting, I think, if people are in agreement.
Yeah, and what it is, what the public hearing is for you all to gather information, but it's for the applicant to hear what may be an issue too. And you may not have to pointedly direct the applicant to say, you're going to change this, right? We're not, but it could be a time at the public hearing to say, I agree with that. I agree with that statement. I agree with that comment. Or we've heard 4 different groups say the exact same thing. You listening, Chatham Park? Are you listening to that? And that's where hopefully they're going to be able to have a discussion and say, yes, we understand that. And yes, we're going to pull that back and we're going to look at that. That's what I envision is at the 28th meeting or whenever we have a public hearing, is that I will be standing here giving you comments that I've generated as staff along with other staff. The public will be here. Planning board potentially could be here. If we hold it on the 28th, it's going to be dicey for them to have a meeting between now and then, but we'll have to work with the chair to see if that's okay. And you'll have the committee who will be here. The committee's report will be pretty much a transcript that will be delivered to you all of the recommendation meeting that was held back on the November 2nd. So we've had the court report do the transcript of that, and then the recommendations, the motions, the discussions, all along that motion. That'll all be transcribed to you, so you'll be able to read that.
In advance of the public hearing?
Hopefully that'll all be in your packet before the 28th meeting. My comments, my recommendations, their recommendations. If we had a planning board meeting that we were able to get their recommendations, those would be included as well. The only thing that you wouldn't have in a written form, in a packet, would be public information. And what we would do is anything that's been received by us from the Bynum Group or other citizens, those will be included as well. There's no reason not to include those. That'll just be more information that you have to read over the Thanksgiving holiday.
Mm-hmm. So part of my interest in us establishing the Additional Elements Review Committee was that they would serve a role in reviewing so many different disparate sources. And, I think that it was Planning Board member Elfland who pretty sure she emailed all of us back in July. And I'm looking at her comments, and I've reviewed them, but it's 25 pages. And I anticipate we're going to see at least another 3 pages from another member, and let's just round it up, say it'll be 30 pages of comments from the Planning Board. Do we want to ask ourselves to review that? Or are we preferring that the Additional Elements Review Committee have the opportunity to consider those Planning Board perspectives?
I think it's our responsibility to review it.
Mm-hmm. Would you like others to review it? I sure would.
I mean, in addition to, we would read it and then I would also review it.
I mean, I think you're welcome to ask anybody you want to review it or, to help. I mean, I certainly think that I might do that, but we've asked this committee to review it and give us their recommendations. We've asked the Planning Board to give us their recommendations. We're asking staff to give us their recommendations. At the end of the day, it will be processed here with the assistance of all the resources we have available to us. But at the end of the day, it's this board that will make recommendations to Chatham Park for revisions, modifications that we'd like to see in these elements in order for them to be incorporated into the master plan.
Other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I guess what's on the table is the public hearing on the 28th or some later date.
I will note, by the way, that at the evening on which Dr. Knapp is going to be with us to discuss the 1,4-dioxane, that's been something that's been on our calendar for some time. And the board had indicated that they wish to be updated with respect to upstream source reduction of that. And I don't have a feel for, I thought his presentation last time was half an hour or so, was it? Folks remember? I don't know if his update will be that lengthy again.
I'll make a motion that we hold the public hearing on the 28th.
Second.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Jay Farrell, to hold the public hearing on the 28th.
I'll say I prefer that we hold it on the December 12th. I think that would give clearly adequate time for the Planning Board to do their work independently of the Additional Elements Review Committee, and that would also give us more time to digest the presentation that Mr. Nass is going to give on the 14th, and any of the other documents, written feedback comes to us.
Well, I think that Nass presentation was scheduled for tonight, envisioned for tonight.
right now.
Earlier on, it was envisioned for tonight. The committee thought that they wanted to see their recommendations in print so that they would be assured that they were captured correctly by the court reporter. So that's why they're holding that back to the 28th.
Thank you. One more reason.
Motion.
We have a motion on the table.
Yeah, motion on the table is by Michael Fiacco, seconded by Jay Farrell, to proceed with the public hearing on the 28th. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Opposed?
The motion then fails. Is there a substitute motion for a public hearing on another date?
Yes, I move that we have the public hearing on December 12th.
Second.
Moved by John Bonnet, seconded by Pamela Baldwin, to have the public hearing on December the 12th. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. To have it on the 12th of December. Did we have abstentions? Or did I just miss hearing? Or did you hear?
It was good.
Okay. Pardon?
Everybody agreed. I didn't
Everybody
think
did?
about saying anything.
I wasn't sure. Thank you. All right,
Thank you,
thank
Board.
you. Thank you very much. Old business. Item number 2 is the request for the change in designation for property on Hillsborough Street. Victoria Bailey. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, we have Land Use Amendment LUPA 201601. The Town of Pittsboro Board of Commissioners has proposed to change the land use designation of 13 parcels fronting the eastern side of Hillsborough Street, including in between the properties of 390 and 196 Hillsborough Street. The parcels total approximately 9.99 acres together. The land use plan currently has these parcels designated for mixed-use town center. The proposed amendment will change their designation to traditional neighborhood. The parcels to the north, south, and east are currently designated as mixed-use town center, while the parcels on the west side are designated for traditional neighborhood. Traditional neighborhood describes existing neighborhoods in Pittsboro that are primarily residential but also include a mix of other uses. The density of development in these traditional neighborhoods is typically less than that found in town center, but higher than that found in the medium density residential category. The properties are currently zoned R12, which is classified as medium density by the Pittsboro zoning ordinance. The board has proposed this amendment so as to better fulfill the character goal of the land use plan. Changing the designation to traditional neighborhood would preserve the character of the town as it grows, maintain Pittsboro's community character, enhance quality of life, and protect existing neighborhoods. A public hearing was held on October 24th. 3 citizens spoke at the hearing, 1 in favor of the amendment and 2 opposed. The planning board considered this amendment at their meeting on November 7th and in a 4-0 vote recommended to approve. Staff recommends approval of the proposed amendment as it is consistent with the character goal of the land use plan. Any questions?
Are there questions from Victoria Vale? Is there anyone else that wishes to make a statement at this time? Victoria is showing us that there is a motion to approve. They're on the board.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Michael Fiocco has moved and Matt Wilson Foley has seconded the motion to approve the redesignation of the parcels so stated. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. We would then now be looking at the water efficiency policy, wastewater and reclaimed water ordinance for review.
Good evening. I'm going to introduce Jennifer Platt. She's going to clean up for me on this one, for you Cubs fans. So, back in March, you were presented with draft ordinances for water efficiency and the Reclaimed Water Ordinance. Since then, we've received comments from the Planning Board, and we've reviewed these documents over and over again, if you will. And we've basically broken two ordinances into two ordinances and one policy. The reason we did that was because the water efficiency policy recommends water efficiency fixtures. It doesn't require them. And so the ordinance is more of an irrigation focused and water waste focused. The policy is on, we would like people to use these water efficient fixtures, but it's not a law, if you will. And the other ordinance is the Reclaimed Water Ordinance, which essentially we didn't change much of that, but we've gone over it several times, and it's in concert with what Chatham Park has been doing with the Purple Pipe in preparation for that, as well as envisioning possible reclaimed water systems in the other parts of Pittsboro that can be extended as we decide to do so to certain neighborhoods and subdivisions and businesses. So I'm going to have Jennifer give you a very quick version of what you're looking at, and tonight it is for review and consideration only. We're not asking you for adoption. Jennifer will also talk about the water emergency plan that is still being drafted and when that's coming soon. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. As Brad mentioned, we've broken up the original proposed ordinances, and the highlights of the water efficiency policy are really to formalize the board's commitment to water efficiency and how beneficial that is to the town in terms of not only conserving limited natural resources, but also reducing some of our non-revenue water losses, improving public safety by reducing water waste on the streets that can cause long-term damage. So the bottom line is that this is a way for the town to be more resourceful with its taxpayer dollars and reducing expenses associated with water treatment. And then the second item we had on there is the irrigation and water waste ordinance. Would you like to go through each of these one at a time and then answer any questions, or wait until the end?
What's the feeling of the board? Do you want to wait till the end, or take things as she goes through each draft document? Go to the end then.
Okay. So the next one is the irrigation and water waste ordinance, and we did break this into an ordinance because there is an enforcement mechanism that's available should it ever be needed. The first component of it is to target irrigation systems. There's great technology out for irrigation equipment now where systems can be very efficiently designed and maximize meet the water needs of a particular landscape, but also not be wasteful in that water. And the components of that are system design, requires use of sensors, whether it's soil moisture or rain sensors. It's never good to drive down the street and see an irrigation system running during the rain. And then other components are the water waste, and that is to formalize a commitment to efficient use of water, not only from irrigation systems, but also to encourage people to repair leaks when needed so that they don't cause excessive use of water when they can be fixed. And then the final component is the enforcement mechanisms. A lot of times, as you are, I'm sure, familiar, the ordinances are a good way to educate citizens that there is this commitment to using water efficiently, and we can point to the ordinance and say these are recommended in the town's ordinances. And then, should there become a need in the future, they can be enforced as well. So there's enforcement mechanisms with penalties. And then the other component of this ordinance is that it reinforces at the end that all these ordinances are designed to be tied together. So we have the town's reclaimed water ordinance, and also down the road there'll be water shortage response ordinances and potentially other ordinances. And then we have the third component, which is the reclaimed water ordinance. Thank you, Brian, for putting these up on the screen for me. The reclaimed water ordinance, as you may remember when we discussed this back in March, at some point we anticipate expanding the town's reclaimed water system. So this is to lay out the requirements for that reclaimed water system, that if a particular customer is using irrigation along a reclaimed water line, that they would tap into the reclaimed water system, which would benefit both the customer and the town as well, to use a non-potable source for irrigation use. And that's the main premise of the reclaimed water ordinance, is that, just outlining what the conditions are of usage and when it's required, and that there would also be an enforcement mechanism to the reclaimed water ordinance as well, because it is extremely important to the state and to us, of course, that we be very careful about the reclaimed water supply, and that it doesn't get cross-connected with the town's potable water. And so if somebody's accidentally drinking reclaimed water instead of potable drinking water. And then, as Fred alluded, the final piece that we had discussed briefly in March is the town has a we have a water emergency ordinance that dates from way back in 1986. And as you might imagine, it's kind of outdated. Town's Emergency Water Conservation Provisions Ordinance, July 1986. So what we are working on doing right now is updating that ordinance. The Triangle J Council of Governments has been working on a regional drought response communications initiative, and I'm supporting them in doing that. And that report is going to be finished in December. So we were trying to hold off until that regional report is finished, until the town updates its water shortage emergency response, and also the water shortage response plan. So we will come back to the board in early 2017 to present. So I would be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Jennifer Platt or for Fred Taylor?
I think if I could just point out too, I don't think, if you don't feel like we've had enough time to think about this, I know Fred's talked about it a little bit before. We've had quite a bit of information in front of us. If you feel like you need to take another meeting to come back and do a final review
topic to wait for another chance to review, board. Cindy?
I was feeling that way. And I didn't take advantage of the opportunity to really dig into this as much as I want to. With that said, I could provide some of my initial comments on it. Okay. On the reclaimed water ordinance intent, talked about available to the property. And I wonder what available means. Does it mean that a pipe has been stuck to a parcel? Or does it mean that the owner of that parcel has the opportunity to spend a lot of money to tap into the reclaimed water? Because I think it also talks about where it is available, you are required to use it. And it seems to me, if we're requiring somebody to use it when we put it in the street, you ought to provide it to that property that fronts on that street so that they can utilize it instead of having to pay for that connection.
Do you want to answer that?
So if I think I'm understanding your question, the intent is to require it if it's available at your property. In other words, you don't have to use reclaimed water if you can't access it at your property.
Right. So if there's a reclaimed water line in the street and it's paved back over, and I own that parcel, that now is that technically available to me?
Yes.
So I would have to then pay to get access to that pipe. Cut
Yep.
up the road.
Just like you would water or sewer.
So what I'm suggesting is that doesn't satisfy me from the perspective of available. If we're putting it in the road, let's stub it to the parcels. Because if we're going to require people to do it, that's what I think we should do. So that's what I think the ordinance should clarify.
Thanks. So the other issue is eventually the town could decide to extend reclaimed water to a certain business at the town's expense or a certain neighborhood at the town's expense, depending on how we feel this would benefit the town as a whole. So that piece you just mentioned could be a part of that discussion and policy, if you will.
There is discussion about the town's right of entry to the property to look into issues. And I think it would be important to include language that says, only after notification is that allowed to occur.
Sure.
I must admit that the civil penalties seem really extreme. $10,000 per day, $25,000 per day. And I think I heard, yes, we don't want people cross-connecting, but I guess how is it that would be the equivalent of damage that would occur through some violation of this ordinance?
We'll be happy to take a look at that.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that, of course, none of the rates are set right now, but the premise being is that it will be much more cost effective for a customer to buy the reclaimed water than the potable water down the road. So if they were required to tap into the reclaimed water system, it's not going to be more expensive for them. It'll probably save them money in the long run.
Right, it's that capital expense that is going to be problematic because it's not cheap to do that kind of tap. There is the interruption of service, and I would think it would be appropriate to have language that says that the town no longer provides reclaimed water, that in fact it's no longer a violation for those to use potable water for irrigation. Those are my initial thoughts on reclaimed water. And it took me a moment to realize that the water efficiency policy was goal-oriented. But there are a couple of cases where it is mandatory. Item I, page 3, talks about PRV being mandatory. Now, I can't imagine that every resident needs a PRV. So we can modify that language. And item G on page 4. Well, it says that recycled water shall be used as a source of decorative water features. So if these are aspirational, goal-oriented, we've got 2 mandatory.
Yeah, thank you.
While we're on this, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the enforcement mechanism. Engineer, or is it her assignee or designee? Practically, how will this work in the next 5-10 years? I mean, before we embark on the kind of growth that the phasing plan would suggest, growth in staff. I guess the question is, Fred, at what point will you have the capacity internally to do that enforcement? And in the interim, what are we thinking will be the designee?
So I believe the intent of this is, depending on staff levels at the time, designee, but it always begins with a letter or a warning. You know, you go through the same legal penalty as you would any. You give the accused ample time and opportunity to remedy the issue before actual penalties or whatever is accused. But designee, and what we've been trying to do with this is envision, who's going to be working for the town. What type of organization are we going to have? We're thinking public works, public utilities director, town engineer, or their designee, because that falls generally under the umbrella public utilities. Historically, the engineering department didn't exist, and so now we are here, but we don't do a whole lot of, we don't do really much violations activities other than stormwater. But anything we do is going to involve the Public Works Department. I mean, that's clear. Any water, sewer, or purple pipe type issue will involve the Public Works Department, Public Utilities Department. So, who's actually doing what at the staff level is unknown at this point. It's just we're placing titles in here because that's the best we have to work on. We could back up and just say the town manager or his designee, and that works as well. But that's kind of it.
Well, and I think the way it would operationalize is much the same as it would now. It would be kind of more or less complaint driven, either from a contractor who's out in the field, or say, for instance, someone from our utilities department, or it could be one of our inspectors, or it could be Fred himself. And then the complaint would arrive at Fred's office, and the way this is written, Fred or someone that Fred would designate would then, I guess, generate the administrative work of enforcement at that point. And yeah, it's going to be, to your point, it's going to be scalable as we grow. I mean, we're going to have to have more people with the wherewithal to do this as we get larger, because we may have more complaints as this moves forward. But it wouldn't really operationalize that much different from the way it would now. I mean, the way I kind of look at it is we'll have, we have issues from time to time on, say, for instance, tapping a fire hydrant without us knowing about it or notifying us, or maybe even on some occasions tapping a line without going through due process on our end. And so we kind of work through that the same way as I would imagine us working through this. To your point, yeah, obviously as we get bigger, we'll have to enforce that.
I guess my initial impression was that much of this enforcement might actually take place during kind of monitoring or implementation inspections during construction when the pipe was being laid, but maybe admittedly my scan was brief. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the difference between the voluntary measures and the mandatory portions.
The other piece with irrigation and water waste is we did meet with the county
That's what I was
about
wondering. Okay.
building inspections, and they're willing to work with us to add pieces like this into their checklist.
Good.
And then provide us with metrics on who's doing what.
Great.
That'll take some time, but they're cooperative and willing to work with us.
Wonderful.
And that's another, tool in the toolbox.
Well, that was one of my thoughts before I realized it was aspirational, goal-oriented, that we're probably asking building inspections to get involved.
Yeah.
But, I don't think we want to confuse people in thinking it's mandatory when it's not.
So the water efficiency measures and the policy, you're correct, they're not mandatory.
Right.
They're aspirational. And then, however, the way the irrigation and water waste ordinance is written is that is mandatory. It would be efficient with the irrigation and water waste.
So, Fred, describe for me what you're mentioning about building inspections, providing us feedback on what kind of fixtures are being used in construction. And that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes. And they're going to help track that. You've all probably heard of Energy Star appliances. When you go to the Home Depot or Lowe's to buy an energy efficiency rating is on the appliance. WaterSense is the water version of that, and it is becoming more and more the norm, and the price of those appliances is really no different than appliances that are not water efficient. So we met with the county to ask, can we do this, and how can we do it with your inspections that are already going on. So it is aspirational, as we heavily encourage, while in most cases it's happening already. It's becoming the norm as the more water efficient fixtures.
And I guess for public health and safety, there would have to be some enforceability to the reuse policy.
I'll just mention the planning board asked us what's the efficiency of using hot water on demand. I don't know if you've been here. Well, we looked into it, and it is much more efficient. Much less energy is used to heat water to certain BTUs, et cetera, than it does save water. But the question was, does it really work? How much? So we actually did some research.
So that's another one of the clauses in the water efficiency policy, especially in new construction.
Anything further? Shall we take advantage of the offer to revisit this as we might need to after greater in-depth thinking on our part and yours? Okay, great, thank you. That brings us to the manager's update on projects. You have that for you on your desk. Brian Brewstead.
Thank you. I will go through these. If you have any questions, please let me know. Shannon Park, Sanford Forest Main and Reclamation Plant. We are obviously working through the agreements for those. We have a few issues we'd like to discuss with you as far as the Forest Main agreement with Sanford. Mr. Nuss and I have also had discussions with Chatham Park about the reclamation plant memorandum of understanding, as well as the agreement with Chatham Park to guarantee the financing of the Forest Main and some other related issues. And so we have some draft agreements. We have some draft agreements with relation to the reclamation plant and Chatham Park agreement. We're working through those right now, and we look forward to bringing those to you here very soon. Sanitary sewer inflow and infiltration. Mr. Royal indicated earlier that the work hydrostructures Southwest began work on that. Today camera work began. There's putting a camera down into the lines and trying to assess some of the damage that's occurred. We also notified residents, and you, I think, had this in your packet, but the door hanger notice essentially went out to residents. We're also staff is also going door to door as we go through and trying to make sure that we have any surprises. Some of the stuff that sewer lines can go in strange places, kind of wander around a little bit. We just want to make sure that everyone knows what's happening and what we're doing. Earlier in the agenda, you approved bid proposals for the sidewalk project on Fisher Elementary School Road and 87. We anticipate construction to begin on November 28th. We want to wrap that up by Valentine's on the 17th. As far as Valentine's, we want to wrap that up on Valentine's Day 2017. 14th, if that's yeah, sidewalks are fun. But we look forward to getting those done and using them. Chatham County Housing Committee, you guys will recall discussing affordable housing and the need for our community, particularly as we look at impending growth. There's a group that was formed with the help of Chatham County and Triangle J to look at the first step in the affordable housing issues, to look at the rental housing in Chatham County, or maybe even a lack of rental housing in Chatham County. And the first meeting that was held back on November. Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin was also there, and I thought it was a pretty good meeting. We went over information related to housing in general, and then started getting into defining goals and outcomes. And I think the thing that I like about a committee like this is it's going to be very goal-oriented. It's not going to try to solve the world's problems, but we're going to identify some outcomes and get there. I don't know if you have anything else to add on that. As an FYI, I included all the information you have. It's a little bit. It's actually pretty interesting because there's glossary of terms as far as affordable housing goes, which is very helpful because I know the community's discussed the issue in the past, but really we're obviously typically lacking on a local level. So as much information as we can digest on that, the better as we move forward with all of it. As Mayor Perry indicated, the doctor, and I cannot pronounce the name, will be here on November 28th to talk about the Dioxane 1-4. So we'll hear his update on that as well. Also pleased to announce, and thanks to Commissioner Bonitz for his work on this as well, the electrical vehicle charging stations. We were notified last week that we were approved for charging stations at 4 locations: Page Vernon Park, Mary Hayes Harbor, Holmes Park, Community House, and Town Hall. 1, 2, 3, 4 locations. So we're now, I'm actually working through contractors, looking at contractors. I received a call the other day from another contractor who was interested in it. So you certainly see the electrical vehicle charging stations around a lot more as you keep your eyes open. So hopefully we're going to be ahead of the curve on that one. But anyway, definitely good news that we were approved for funding, formally approved for funding as well. Robeson Creek bridge replacement work is, according to DOT, work is expected to start this week. There is a notice that DOT has put out. I don't know how they distributed it. From our end, we'll be putting it on our social media. I included it before you this evening. Looks like this. So they could be starting as early as tomorrow. They were delayed, of course, by Hurricane Matthew. They'll be assigned a detour route. Chief is aware and has been in contact. And we also have a contact number for DOT that we're going to make available for people. And his name is down at the bottom of that notice that I provided to you, and we'll certainly make that publicly available as well. The gentleman's name is Gary Phillips, and he's a resident engineer, and his phone number is there. So we're going to make extensive use of advertising that phone number. Even so, I would imagine that there'll be some staff involved, and we're certainly willing to do what we need to do there. 15501 widening, there were a few questions, I think, from the board recently, and particularly as folks on 15501 see the surveying work that's going on. Staff will be meeting with DOT on December 6th in Raleigh to get some scoping information on what's involved and really kind of start that conversation. We'll provide you guys with feedback as quickly as possible, and I think as soon as we can. I'd like to have DOT in here also to have a discussion with you guys on how that work will flow and how we want to handle some of the public notifications and communication on that as well. So, because it's obviously going to be a significant project. One of the first things that I walked into my first days on the job here was the Hillsborough Street water main transmission project and all the shutdowns that happened with that. I see 2 of the residents that were right there on the front lines, and so picture that with this, but without a water main, which doesn't necessarily make me sleep any better at night, but it is helpful to know that at least at this point in time there isn't a water main involved with it. So anyway, we'll be looking forward to keeping you updated on that. And again, that work is supposed to start in 2019.
Right.
Yes, sir.
You made mention of it widening and including a sidewalk.
Right.
Does it include light lanes?
We hope. We'll find out at the scoping meeting what they're thinking.
That's what I think we want.
In addition to sidewalks.
Bike lanes both sides, sidewalks both sides.
We hope.
Sidewalk one side. Okay.
That's why we're being.
Well, if we ask for 2 and just get 1, then
We're also aware of the flooding and the multiple driveway culverts. I'll definitely raise that point.
Hurricane Matthew, we could possibly be reimbursed for some of our expenses for Hurricane Matthew. Mr. Cote did a little bit of work in terms of estimating our costs. I don't think we really circled back with Chief Crutchfield on that, though I think we will. I know that there was some overtime from the police side of operations that may be eligible for it, but I'll be engaging discussion with County Emergency Management and FEMA to figure out how we could recoup some of our costs for that. Obviously, we weren't hit as well as some other areas of the state, but we did put in some extra time on that Saturday while things were going sideways a little bit weather-wise. And then finally, just something I would mention, not really on a personal level, more on a community level. There's a Rotary Club that's forming here locally. I would encourage you, if anyone is interested in joining. I've been a Rotarian in 2 different communities. the service projects are, the service projects not only happen on a global level in terms of polio and water quality, but also it's a great opportunity, especially with the new club, to get involved and engaged in service projects at Pittsboro level. And so we've had a couple of formative meetings. There's a club in Sanford, within the current district, there's a club in Sanford, a club in Siler City. Members of both, Rotarians from both clubs have been attended these two meetings and are helping put the club together. So I would definitely encourage any of you, if you're interested, to see me, or I can provide you with information and become a Rotarian, because it's like I said, it's a great way to get back to the community and to communicate with leaders in the community as well. So, with that, I'm probably getting one or two things, so I thought at this point.
Next on the agenda is Commissioner Concern.
If I may, just a couple of questions. The 15501 widening, are we, some of the markers that we're actually seeing on 15501, is that related to the same project, like actual yellow flags all in front of the Alpha install location?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that there have been survey crews there. I couldn't honestly tell you which flags mean what.
Okay.
But I know that most of the activity there that's been there as far as surveying crews is related to the widening project.
It does look more like pre-construction,
That's what I thought.
like a gas line or something. It's not related to just the basic survey of the widening.
Okay.
DOT did some work earlier in the summer across the road. I don't know if there are on a basin. I don't know if widening an existing basin. I don't know. Maybe at least as far as Alpha install, if it's related to that. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to repeat also, as other commissioners have, the desire for 2 sidewalks and bike lane, if possible. Those were the kind of the rumors that I was hearing a year or more ago, I think. But, and then the other thing, Brian, thank you very much for your work on the electrical vehicle application. The rumor that I'm hearing is that every other municipality or local government got 10,000. We got double. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, they're interested in Pittsboro.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again. And I'm interested in Rotary.
I'm sorry?
I'm interested in Rotary. That's great.
Oh, great.
For that
Yeah,
personal
I will provide you that information. Oh, is that right? Yeah, I'm really glad to see. I really miss. That's one thing I have missed about the previous community I worked with, not having delivery. Anyway, I'll shut up. I really enjoyed it.
Commissioner Concern? Jay Farrell?
Just one, I guess, Mr. Williams was here several weeks ago, regarding Memorial Park and the water. Did we come to any conclusion on that?
No, other than we're going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a conversation with him a week or two ago, and it's just a matter of how we want to formalize it with the county. And I know Mr. Williams would like Siler City to contribute. Talk to the county manager, and so we're trying to figure out how the best way to go about that formally is. But as I told you guys, and I told Mr. Williams, that there's a commitment to do it. We're going to do it. It's just a matter of how we put it on paper.
I know. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
The only thing I have is something I think that you all have received emails about. That was from Julia Kennedy, who had problems with trash being left at the dumpster behind Main Street Station. And as she said, it's just been an ongoing problem, and it attracts all kinds of wildlife, but mainly she's just doesn't like to work.
And Commissioner Bonnet has expressed those concerns, and I think as liaison some of those concerns too. And we've, as of last week, it was picked up. I think it's just going to be a constant effort until we get people trained terms of not putting things out there.
And trying to stop them, especially if it gets picked up, I'll think, oh, good, I'm really.
Yeah, it's just, it's kind of out of the way, so it's kind of an attractive place for people that dump, unfortunately. So,
Was there communication with Heath about putting a lock on the dumpster?
we didn't discuss that, no, other than it's just a problem, we've got to make it not a problem anymore, so that type of a solution. The other thing I considered that we haven't discussed yet is possibly putting a fence of some sort, or fencing up around the dumpsters, and then putting a lock on that. That's worked, in my experience, in other situations.
That's what Habitat does.
Yeah, I mean, you still will have people that keep it up on the wall, but it takes a lot more work and time and effort to do that if you're inclined. And not that I would know, but I mean, seriously.
Is that a private dumpster?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not, but but I think we have people from, maybe either people from out of town or whatever, residents that don't want to dump things in their own trash. But it's kind of become a community dumpster, and that's what creates the mess. Eventually, someone will leave some billing information or something like that in a garbage bag, and why they do that, I don't know, but that tends to flush out some of the scoff laws too.
We've got a littering ordinance we can enforce.
Yeah, the only problem with that is that we would, if we can catch the person who's actually littering, otherwise I don't want it to kind of flow back on the actual property owner. So, yeah, you're right.
There's a famous song to that end that we should be hearing in the next couple of weeks. Alice's Restaurant.
Alice's Restaurant?
Yeah. Found the envelope underneath the trash.
Oh.
Michael, do you have commissioner concerns?
Two. One, in this particular packet, the word draft across these documents makes it kind of difficult to read. I was wondering if we could do it in a different way. Maybe a little red draft up in the right-hand corner. And then I would have to say kudos to engineering, planning, public works. I visited the website today to find a very good set of standard details for Pittsburgh, for water and sewer engineering type stuff that has been lacking, I think, on our website. And I mean, it looks great. So, I think the development community will appreciate it.
Could we just jump in really quick?
Speaking of websites.
Speaking of website, and we didn't have it live. I wanted to put it in memo format in the packet, but we didn't have it live at that point in time. But if you go to the town, let me back up. You go to the town website, okay, and you get the message from Mayor Perry. You can navigate to an area of planning. You go to town departments. So you go down to planning. There is a section here, if you see, there's a section here where we have 2016 approved plans, current plans on review, and then approved rezoning. So if you go to, you can simply, and granted, it's not the flashiest website around, but you can navigate to an area that shows the plans that we have approved in 2016. And I can click on any one of these, but they're rather large files, but it will show you the full set of plans, and then also current plans under review, so you can, it's not just what's been approved, but what we're considering approving. And so kudos to Jeff and Victoria for putting that in place as well. I think it's going to save us a lot of, the word transparency kind of been kicked to death, but in this case I think it's appropriate because it shows exactly, it doesn't only show what's out there in terms of the public realm, what we've already approved, but it shows what we're working on, and that's what transparency really tries to do. Anyway,
And
I'm
this
sorry I didn't bring that
is
up.
building on future improvements to the website, future UDO amendments that might lead to staff having some level of approval, with you all being aware these things are under review. Go out there, take a look at them. There will be some slight improvements that we'll make, categorizing them in order. I want to have Victoria put the acronyms, what they mean on the top. What does an SP mean? What does a sub mean? What's a REZ, SEU? So that'll be there. And then also thinking about the current plans under review is when were they submitted, and we have a track of when they might be considered by the planning board and the town board, so we're going to include that as well. Yeah. And as we get additional review sets, what's out there now is the first review set. We'll get a second review set, and then an official set that will come before you all. We'll update those sets so folks can walk right along with what we're reviewing.
So anybody that wants to see the Bailey's Academy preliminary site plan, this is not approved. This is under review. You have access to it, whether it's you or anybody else with web access.
So you don't have to wait till you get your packet. You can go out there and take a look.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Bob.
I just noticed really a noticeable improvement in our web-based product. So,
good.
Was it difficult to find?
No, not. I mean, it's always a little cumbersome to find, but no, it was not. It wasn't too bad.
I don't have anything really, other than thank you, Mr. Grusebeck, for giving us this copy of the Chatham County Housing Committee report that we went over that night. And I will have to say that was one of the best meetings that I've ever been to discuss affordable housing, rental housing particularly. So if you all get a chance, read through this. It talks about affordable renting housing in Chatham County, Pittsburgh, Goshen, and Sauer City. And they break it down. This was excellent. It wasn't just a matter of just talking about affordable housing or trying to name affordable housing, but it really was in depth. And it was very, very good. I look forward to the next one. So I just wanted you all to know that it's very good.
That's good to hear. Yes. On the notion of the website, I have been observing that the search function is challenging for myself, and I'm wondering, a lot of websites I've seen just use a Google search engine confined to that domain, and I'm wondering if it might be possible to implement that using our web management system. Maybe it's just a question we could look into.
We can definitely look into it. I was trying to think of a search to do right now, because I think it gives a site-specific search. It doesn't necessarily give a Google search. What you're looking for is something that also searches Google.
No, Google offers this service for specific. I don't know what the coding is, but you can do it just confined to your domain and whatever subdomains you control and want to have accessible. It's just a far more robust search engine, I think, than whatever it is that we have, evidently, because I'm using keywords. I know the documents are there, and they're not responding. The searches aren't responding to the documents.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah, we can certainly look at it. To tell you the truth, I don't use that search bar. I will actually enter to find something on our website on occasion. If I don't know exactly where to get it, I don't feel like grinding through it. Oftentimes, I've done a Google search.
Yeah.
And I find it faster.
Yep.
And so maybe that's your point.
Yes, but Google offers the code to
do that on their site.
The search bar up on the right
Right.
on our web page.
Yeah, that's...
It just feeds Google results that are confined to whichever domains we specify.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's see what we can do.
And the other item escapes me. Yes, the other. So I want to express gratitude that we've finally got the credit card processing capabilities, but I received a comment that it requires physical presence, and that seems a little short of the ideal mark. I don't know what the details were, and I'm sure there's some challenges there, but if there are fees, I'm guessing that some people, if they're in need of the convenience of not having to visit town hall in order to whip out their piece of plastic to pay their bill, they might be willing to do it over the telephone and submit to a small fee. So if the fee is the barrier, maybe we should pursue that.
Yeah, I think it was more of on the telephone, it was more of a security concern than it was a fee issue, because there are fees associated with taking credit card payments in town hall and physically in town hall. I think I can find out a little bit more about that, but I believe that was the issue, and then we can certainly revisit what it would take for web-based payments as well. But at this point in time, I think certainly we've made some pretty big steps in terms of. I think the first meeting, the meeting I was appointed here years ago, that we were talking about being able to use credit cards in town hall, and at least we got to that point.
Yeah.
So we can look at different ways to keep improving.
Yeah, let's keep improving. Thank you.
I think I've heard that somewhere. All right. We have also in our packages the pedestrian update plan and the door hangers for the I&I and the housing committee work as Senator, well, I just elevated you. Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin has indicated. So that moves us now to a position of could I hear a motion to go into closed session pursuant to 143-318- point 1A3 to consult with our attorney. Moved by Michael Fiocco.
Second.
Seconded by Jay Farrell. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Yeah. We need a motion to do that.
Can we stretch in place?